What do you do when you're having troubles with your repeater? Well, you head up the hill or go to wherever your repeater shack and antenna are located, and you start doing some troubleshooting. That's what's coming up next on LCARA Ham Radio. All right, folks, so we had to get prepared to take a drive up the hill to go to our main repeater site and take some additional equipment. We had an extra repeater to swap in just to double check, make sure it wasn't something about the main actual repeater itself. But we were also checking the cavities, the 2-meter cavities, cabling, terminal connectors, the SWR for the main cable going up to the main antenna at the top of the tower, which is where our main 2-meter antenna is. And we just started checking all kinds of things while we were able to have a couple of our members call in and use the repeater and send some signals through it so that we could not only catch the issue sort of live and in person, if you will, but just to see if any of the things we were doing were having any positive effect. So we did quite a bit on this particular workday while we were up on the hill at our repeater site. We didn't, I don't think we've fully figured out what the problem is. We've made things better than they were. We can hold our nets and things, but we still have a little bit of work to do to get back into a final configuration that's more of our normal long-term configuration. So we're going to get into some of the things we were doing and checking here in just a little bit. But we've also got a video segment here that will demonstrate the kind of noise we're getting sometimes on the repeater. It's not constant, but after a little bit of use, it seems to become more prevalent. So we're going to let you folks listen to that, and then we'll bring you folks right back, and we'll talk about some of the troubleshooting activities we performed.
Start doing surgery up here. We'll have the repeater offline for a little bit, it looks like. KD6FTR.
She's in there, but she ain't flip over.
DC for backup.
All right, the AC power is disconnected.
Okay.
Yep.
And you ready?
Ready.
Powered off.
Well, as you could hear, folks, we definitely had some very strange, overpowering noise coming in on some of the transmissions on the repeater, especially after the repeater had been up and running for a little while, particularly during nets and things, which we have 2 main nets during the week. So it was worthwhile taking the trip up the hill on our workday to come up here and take a look at what's going on here, since this is our main repeater in the area and is utilized by a lot of folks in the county and surrounding areas. So we did several things to begin the troubleshooting process on this date. We checked the programming of the repeater, the one that was already up there, which is a Yaesu repeater. We also brought a spare Yaesu repeater and swapped it in and checked it and the programming for it and configurations, just to make sure it wasn't a major component like that. We also, as you'll see a little bit later, checked on the cables coming into the shack. We use a biplexer so that we can run several services out of the shack using the same major antenna that we have up on top. I think it's a GP3 that's up there. And also the 2-meter cavities. We also have 70 centimeters and a set of 70 centimeter cavities and so forth. So we checked the cabling on the cavities, and one of the things we noticed is we hadn't really, the club as a whole hadn't really done anything with those cavities in a very long time, potentially as much as 30 or more years, and since when they had been acquired and put in place. And so even though things had worked very well until relatively recently, as we've gone into the winter season here, we started having some issues a few weeks ago. And so we noticed that the T connectors and the cables and the connectors on the cavities probably need some attention. Maybe replaced, but certainly they need to be cleaned up thoroughly, all connection points and that kind of stuff. We double checked, as you'll see again a little bit later, we double checked the tuning of the cavities. The tuning of the cavities still looks very, very good. They still seem to look almost perfect on the tuning. So that part seems okay. But, you know, over time, even in a controlled environment like our shack, we have a heater so it doesn't get too cold in the winter. We have air conditioning so it doesn't get too hot in the summer. And we make frequent trips up there to double check the status of everything. There's still going to be environmental wear and tear on cables and metals and components and things. So we definitely found one bad connector that had been in service for a long time, I believe, but it hadn't been connected quite right. So it's been replaced already. And then most of the other stuff, there's just definite corrosion that has very slowly built up over several decades. So we're probably going to end up replacing those cables, probably all the connectors, the T connectors. That kind of stuff is not that expensive. And after 30 or 40 years, we've probably gotten our money's worth out of those components there with the cavities. And so again, we were checking everything that we could. We took the amplifier. We have a Henry amplifier. We took it out of line just to make sure it wasn't a problem. We have two different antennas that we could use, one higher, one lower on the tower. And so we configured that way and bypassed the cavities completely and all the wiring for the cavities. And so some of the things we did seemed to help, or at least temporarily. But then sometimes the noise would come back again. So we're going to need to do, I think, some further troubleshooting and clean up some of those connectors and connections and things, not only for this 2-meter repeater, but I'm sure probably it's time to do much of the same kind of maintenance for our 70-centimeter repeater. I think those cavities have been around for a good while, and the cables and the connectors as well. But again, we brought several folks up on this date, and we were trying to check everything thoroughly, trying to not make too many assumptions. It's like regular troubleshooting, especially several of us are in the IT field or were. You know, you want to try to have an open mind and try not to assume that too many things are perfect and cannot be the problem, because you really never know 100% for sure what the problem is. So again, we were checking 2 different repeaters, the programming on those repeaters, various cables. We also checked the SWR on the cable going all the way up the tower to the antenna at the top. That cable and that antenna were replaced. And I think we actually did a video on some of that work a couple of years ago, maybe coming up 2.5, 3 years ago. So not that old. The other cable and antenna had been up there, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years. And we're past needing repair and replacement. But the current cable and antenna are relatively new and still checked out just fine. I think the SWR was 1.2 to 1. So again, we didn't really expect that to be a problem, but you just never know. So we were checking that. Again, we checked everything through the biplexer that we use, so that we can use the dual band antenna at the top. Everything through the biplexer seemed okay. Everything, you know, the cavities seem to still be tuned very well. So we're not 100% sure what the issue is here, but we did come up with a configuration that seemed to get us not only back on the air, but back to where things were sounding pretty good. And so the current state of how we have things configured is we're actually bypassing the cavities completely right at the moment. We're not using the biplexer. We're not using the cavities. We're using 2 separate antennas. One is at the very top of the tower. One is maybe halfway down, somewhere in that range. And in this configuration, we don't really need the cavities. And we do have the amplifier hooked back up in line again. And we have that repeater. So we seem to be getting pretty good results right now. Now, I believe we have a number of remote sites that can come in through 2 meters, or actually through 220, 1.25 meter, and a voter system that lets them come in and talk through the main repeater. We may have an issue with one of those remote sites. We'll be checking on that as well. Those are typically at hospitals and things like that. but we can hold our nets, and I think for the most part, everybody sounds pretty good in the current configuration. But this is just temporary. It's not how we prefer to be set up. It's not how we're meant to be set up. So we're going to need to take a look and figure out, you know, what do we need to do, and we'll get those cavities back in line, get to where we're using that top antenna for everything instead of having to use two separate antennas. At least we had the ability to configure things the way they are right now to help get us more cleanly back on the air. But we want to figure out what's going on and go ahead and clean up some of these connectors and things, maybe replace some of these things that are quite old, really, and either being cleaned up or replaced should function a little better for us. So, you know, that's just how we have to do things and troubleshoot things, you know. But we check the repeater, we check the amplifier, we check the biplexer, we check the cavities, various cables, the cable going up the tower, the relatively new cable, relatively new antenna on top of the tower, pretty much everything down the road, just to make sure and try to figure out where the issue is. So we're going to end up with a short segment here with a little bit of audio, kind of showing how we more or less left things and left them in pretty good shape for us. But we'll be continuing this work and may have a part 2 to this video showing, you know, exactly what we probably found at the end. So we'll bring you folks right back.
ASU has to have their tritone just like
KY4 VDP.
That's
portable for WM4
way better.
LM.
That was incredibly way better. Is this the old one you just pulled off?
Yes, sir. What are you trying to say? Maybe a bad cable? Or something bad fitting?
Probably.
WM4
Look at all that corrosion in there.
All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up. We are back on the air for now, and we'll continue to troubleshoot this situation and bring you folks along. So we will see you folks in the next video. Enjoy your radio, enjoy your hobby. 73.